Good afternoon, everyone. Great to be here in your lovely, vibrant, and friendly city. Over the course of next 20 minutes or so, what I will do is to make an attempt to take you through the vision of the future as we see it in Nokia Bell Labs. And I'm going to try and establish and argue the fact that foundational to all our futures, and enterprise futures in particular, networking technologies and 5G in particular will be foundational for that success. And I'm going to establish that these technologies are going to do profoundly important things for us with humanity and for humanity, and hopefully convince you that the world we are entering is a very exciting and exhilarating world where networks are going to be key to drive this transformation. And once we understand that, I think all policy, regulation, spectrum choices, infrastructure use, investments, new business models all follow from there. So here we go. It's a quick tour of the future. So one of the points made by Paul Krugman, an economist, is productivity isn't everything, but in the long run, it's almost everything. If you think about it, there isn't much in human existence that hasn't been about productivity. Think about it for a second. What's the purpose of a car? Move from point A to point B faster, the plane, the train, the same, agricultural tools, logistics, the same. So at the end, it's all about productivity. So why do I make this point? I make this point because this is where we are, and this is our problem. This is data from the US, but it sort of applies globally. What you see on the left-hand side, the physical networks age, it's almost the first and the second industrial revolution, where the productivity growth rates have been quite significant. In fact, the 1950s, as you see, was the highest productivity growth we have seen in the United States. And after that, it sort of diminishes. Almost the time of the third industrial revolution, or so-called the internet age, we call it digital goods and network age, the productivity growth rates have sort of fallen 1/3 of what used to be in the last 50 years or so. And that should get us all concerned and alarmed. All the investments that we've made in ICT, it hasn't really done much in terms of really enhancing our productivity and economic growth prospects. Of course, it has done the baseline, it has connected the unconnected, but what have we not done? So what I'm going to argue is what we have done, but what we need to do differently going forward. So after all the innovations in networks, web platform, cloud services, smart devices, we are here. This is my view. This is what most people do, isn't it? What we do is we consume ourselves or use our time to consume relatively ineffective media, if you will. Who here thinks this is the future of the internet? I don't see many hands. And when we are not doing this, we are doing this. This is a study from Mary Meekers around, she publishes very good internet trends. The fastest growing mobile application is shopping. Now, who thinks the future of humanity is shopping? Again, no hands. But clearly, I think it's no surprise because the internet as built is premised on a business model around advertising. And once you do that, of course, you get people shopping. So the idea is that we have to move beyond this in order to deliver true effective economic and productivity growth from an enterprise perspective, and that's really the story that we're going to talk about. So where are we going from here? And what are we going to do differently? We are going to enter a new era. We call it the 5G Future X era, and we're going to focus on a new segment. It's not going to be consumer-centric in the same way. It's going to be business and industrial-centric. So what we will do here is that what we have done in the declining productivity era that I talked about, what we have done as an industry, we're focused on the relatively easy parts to digitize. Media, finance, journalistic services, some e-commerce services. And what we have seen, as you see on this chart, we have achieved good growth, 2.7% in those segments. But what we haven't done is address the 70% part of the physical world, the mining, the transportation, the rail, the infrastructure of warehouses or factories or cities. Those are the opportunities where we have to digitize the physical infrastructure. And that's where I think the 5G and the foundational networking technologies are going to come in to try to do this kind of reorientation, if you will. Now, if you also see what hasn't happened in this declining productivity era is that the investment in ICT hasn't happened in that segment. It's 70 and 30. So you see it's almost like a 2x opportunity for us that we're going to talk about. So it's huge. The revolution that we're going to go after is going to be almost twice what we have done. So that's really the opportunity in front of us. Another way of looking at it is some people like to see this as how big or how complex or interesting this revolution could be, is you can almost think of this as a collision of ICT and OT. OT being operations technology, that's the thing that we need to run our physical world. Warehouses, factories, cities, transportation, ports, harbor, etc., etc. And it uses relatively little ICT because what they do is they've used proprietary bespoke technologies. Often they're closed systems. They used wired, but not so much wireless. And they innovate at longer cycles of innovation. So they're usually not very frequent in terms of innovation. But here, what they're really good at is the following. They are extreme reliable. So we think about carrier-grade telco networks are good. We are 99.8% good. So we have this occasional call drop, 0.2%. It's a super good network. But mission critical is 6 nines. It's a super reliable network. So the opportunity and the challenge for us as an industry is to use the general purpose nature of ICT and the 5G technologies to be able to address the 6-9 reliability that the enterprises will be looking for. So how are we going to do this? We're going to do that by using all layers of the radio network. We're going to use ultra low latency. We're going to use all parts of the networks. We're going to use the scalable cores that sort of self-heal itself, and we're going to dynamically network slice that to deliver on the SLA promise of the enterprise. These are the requirements of the future, which essentially the future of the enterprise will be built on and drive this future transformation. Another way of thinking about it, I'm not going to go through the details of this particular slide, is from a traffic growth perspective, and I could summarize it for you that the point I've made around this insertion point in this collision of ICT and OT and the human-machine collaboration, if you will, is that there have been phases of the last 15 and 20 years, beginning of the internet till now, that you can sort of map the structure of bandwidth growth. The bandwidth growth that you see is the yellow line that sort of has been growing up. It sort of identifies with in the interesting time when the internet was a way to connect things. Once I was connected, I wanted to find what are the other ends of the hubs. So digital printed information, then it became about sharing era, the Napster, BitTorrent, etc., e-commerce, and so on and so forth. But for the last 5 years, we've taken a bit of a pause from a new services standpoint and done everything mobile, which in itself is a big thing. But what we're saying is that the big transformation is connecting everything, not just people. The people part is the dotted line one. And to some extent, it's uninteresting because people will continue to do what they do. Watch video and create content, cats and shopping, as we talked about. But businesses are going to change, or life in a broader context is going to change significantly because we're going to connect everything. Buildings, shipping, pallet, rail, government, infrastructure, anything that you imagine not instrumented today will be connected. And that's the point of 5G. You can argue the job of 5G is to let people do what they do, but integrate the machine part in a way that makes techno-economic sense. And I think Joey talks about the fact that we have to ensure that this human-machine collaboration allows us to excel in new ways, and that's really the interesting part of the whole future enterprise transformation that we're going to be talking about. So what does it mean, the augmented digital human thing? I'm going to talk about the human part in a minute, but what's the opportunity? How much money are we talking about? So there has been estimation by McKinsey Global Institute around the economic value of doing this industrial IoT and this automation experiences for the enterprise can range anywhere from 4 to 11 trillion. Now, this is not profiteering. What this is about productivity and efficiency. So if businesses can do what they do in a better way and save, 30% of that could be refed into networks. So this is the interesting part of the whole thing. it's that ecosystem effect that we're going to create. This is another thing that Bell Labs, we commissioned a study to look at all the next generation networks that we have to build in terms of the hyperlocality, in terms of how many number of sites that we will need, and we come up with a 14 million number. Today, the total number of global macro base station sites around the world is 7 million. So you see the 7 and 14, another 2x difference in terms of where things can go and what the opportunity is. We have also talked about in Bell Labs a study around this inflection point for the US, which we think is going to be between 2028 and 2033, when the next productivity cycle or jump can happen. And I think what's going to really drive this is this macro picture that we talk about. When we break it down from an industry perspective, let's say we take a shipping port for that matter, we can actually think about the individual use cases in productivity, labor safety, business diversification, and sort of figure out two approaches, an as-is approach and a 5G orientated approach to figure out what is the resultant business performance enhancements, the set of operating profits improvements, and the efficiency and the productivity gains. And that sort of results in uplifting all industries and hence the national GDP itself. So we will come, and I'll talk to a little bit about this 2028, 2033 timeframe from the US, but it can sort of applies to other geographies, other regions, based on the different strategies of diffusions and adoptions that we will go for. So I said I'm going to talk about the human part, and this is an interesting term called transhumanism. I don't know if you've come across this. There's a lot of wacky definitions out there around this. Look it up, but I think the most reasonable one that I found was the possibility and desirability of fundamentally improving the human condition through applied reason. Reason should apply, it doesn't always today. Especially by developing and making widely available technologies to eliminate aging and greatly enhance human intellectual, physical, and psychological capacities. This is the important one. Greatly enhance human intellectual, physical, and psychological capacity. So you can almost argue the job of 5G networks is almost like an augmented digital human network to be able to assist with this human intellectual, physical, and physiological capacity. So I'm going to change the term on you a little bit from transhumanism to augmented digital human system. This is a picture of me. I look a little bit better underneath the suit. But basically what we are saying is, with this kind of a central nervous system powered by 5G, humans can do a number of things. We have today limited capacities. We have limited ability to sense. We have limited ability to think. But what we could do is to augment all of that. We can extend our brains by using AI in the cloud. We can't increase the computation power of the brain, but we can get an assistance function from the cloud. We can build distributed cloud mechanisms so that the response time could be as quick as possible, and that's the notion of building edge clouds proximus to you. We can use exoskeletons to be able to help us with augmented physical actuation systems. We can use hypersensory systems to know the task that we are performing, how it's impacting us or how it's impacting the environment. So at the heart of all of this is the digital augmented system. We call it the 5G network. And it's the first general purpose technology. For those who don't often think about these things, the general purpose technologies are like the steam engine, the printing press. Internet can be considered one of the general purpose technology, and 5G has the promise to be that general purpose technology that sort of forms the foundational network fabric for businesses and life. So my core point is this, that we can extract new value by massively increasing productivity, by automating the industrial and physical environment and sort of coupling that tightly to the human experiences. We can drive it through new value architecture by massively distributing the network to the edges, and we can actually build new value systems using augmented digital human systems that we talk about. But we all know that we have to push the limits and jump to the edges, which is essentially another notion of pushing the edges. But what does it mean? I would leave you with the following summary, that think of the 5G network as a 9-dimensional evolution of pushing the envelope of networking thing. So far as an industry, We have worked with the capacity, two dimensions of the capacity, the spectrum and the efficiency, spectral efficiency. We haven't done much on the spatial dimension. Now, what we will do in the space of 5G, we will not only have to work on the 3 dimensions of capacity, but 3 dimensions of reliability and the 3 dimension of latency. Now, that's a human revolution, that's a technology revolution, the likes of which we have not seen before, and 5G will be at the center of it. So what's the overall strategy going to be? I think that the thing that's going to matter in this new era is not cloud technologies per se, not server blades and not devices, because devices are simpler. The thing that matters most and the thing that's in the middle that connects all of it, because this network in the middle has to onboard a massive number of devices, connect those devices to the cloud, but more importantly, you'll see that the cloud is going to move to the network, and that's a little bit about what virtualization is. Because of this low latency requirement that we have to control machines, we have to move to the edge. So you see the cloud, devices, and network are all going to become one thing, and they're going to reside at the edge. And edge is where you will have a strategic significance around whoever controls the edge will have a strategic dominance going forward in trying to render, analyze, and drive contextual services from a locality perspective. This is our FutureX network concept that we have built in Nokia Bell Labs. It is the network that's going to deliver on this promise. As you can see, it's a 9-layered architecture, but the important thing is the following. The bottom part is the most interesting one, because as I talked about, the intelligence is going to collapse to the edges. So what it is NFV running an edge cloud for this high performance, low latency. SDN, stitching it all together, because once you create these software instances, you have to stitch it to the underlying infrastructure. Long wires and short wireless. This means deep fiber into the network and high powerful radio at the edges. And then around that, you have this common programmable network OS. Everything has to be managed holistically as one big thing. You have to have application platform and security around it, and then the federation of this with the other. And that's the world in 2025, which essentially would allow us to sort of drive towards this human-machine collaboration and look for those productivity enhancements and moving this whole apparatus to the edges and trying to drive new value creation. So the last point I would make is keeping this concept of edge in mind and how the architecture of the networks have to change from clouds that we have built, which is thousands of kilometers away, centralized, will now have to move to the edges. I call it the harmonization of global local. In some ways, because technology is going to become very local, it has the potential to even solve the geopolitical issues. Not because of any political agendas, you have to use the architecture and the physics behind it to be able to build those edge cloud networks, because 5G network is going to be built around it. So nations who have the investments going into the space will clearly have an advantage. So everything that has outsourced or taken away will now come back to nations, because things have to be done locally within a 50, 100-kilometer radius, because that's where the networks have to be built to be able to deliver on the promise of high performance, low latency, ultra reliability, and security the enterprises will need of the future. So for that reason, clearly, edge matters. So I'm going to wrap it up. We started with the fact that we have the evolution, the first and the second industrial revolution, where we had a growth in the first and second. The third industrial revolution was flattening. And as we move into the human-machine collaboration age, powered by the central nervous system, the augmented 5G digital human network, we will see another rise in productivity. And that's the opportunity for us to grab onto as an industry, how 5G networks and this architecture concepts will be applied locally to bring this productivity gains for our enterprise and our industries. And just to finish, people who have not or forgotten who Nokia Bell Labs, we have been good at this for a while. We have been basically behind every major invention that has really powered the future of communication, foundation of the internet, to mobile and fixed communication. We have been winning major awards, 9 Nobel, 3 Turings, Grammys, but it's really about foundational breakthrough, and we remain looking forward to become and be the undisputed world digital innovation factory. So thank you very much for listening. I'll be around to take any questions for you as well. Thank you very much.